Hello and welcome to my teaching demonstration. My name is Veronica Diegas and I'm going to be going over chapter 14. It is Jane Eyre, The Initial Spark, Text Analysis, chapter 14. So I will be focused on imagery, symbolism, foreshadowing, metaphoric verb, mood, and of course the initial spark. What I mean by the initial spark, I am referring to at the point in the conversation that allowed the reader to know that Mr. Rochester is interested in Jane. Whether they're aware of it or not, there is literary text that allows the reader to understand what might happen in the future. So to give a little context and introduce the characters in this scene, Jane is a new hire and governess to Mr. Rochester, who is the master of the home and the caretaker of his adopted French daughter. So in an earlier part in the book, Mr. Rochester had guests over for dinner, which he called for Jane's drawing book so that he could look at them. Now that, that is over with and it's another day he's had dinner, he retires into the drawing room where he watches the fireplace. As he's watching the fire burn, he calls for Jane to come in and conversate with him. Of course, Jane appears, not wanting to be the main center of his attention, and however finds herself in a situation where she's kind of forced to have to be because he tries to initiate her to talk to him. I picked this part in the story because it was the most uncomfortable for me, but it was very telling of the situation. So just to go over the scene, Mr. Rochester has an exchange with Jane and he says, "You, I am persuaded, can suit me if you will. You puzzled me the first evening I invited you down here. I have almost forgotten you since other ideas have driven you from my head. But tonight I am resolved to be at ease, to dismiss what importance and recall what pleases. It would please me now to draw you out to learn more of you, therefore speak." Instead of speaking, I smiled, not a very complacent or submissive smile either. "Speak," he urged. "About what, sir?" Jane replied. "Whatever you like. I leave both the choice of subject and the matter of treating it entirely to yourself." Now Jane is commenting to herself, and she says, "Accordingly I sit and said nothing. He expects me to talk for the mere sake of talking and showing off. He will find he has addressed himself to the wrong person," I thought. "You are dumb, Miss Eyre." I was dumb still. He bent his head a little towards me, and with a single hastily glance seemed to dive into my eyes. So clearly there's a lot going on in this scene. Mr. Rochester wants interaction from Jane. While she's not trying to be rude, she still refuses to do it on his terms. There is some aggression and pushiness on his part, and there is some resistance on her part. And while this doesn't seem like it is the precursor of what's to come, there are little indications within it that kind of tell otherwise. So right away, one of the things that caught my attention was, "You, I am persuaded, can suit me if you will." Now that struck a lot of attention to me when I read. For me, this is the first and initial spark of Mr. Rochester feeling for Jane. "You, I persuaded, can suit me if you will." Another part that I wanted to deep dive into the text was the foreshadowing. The foreshadowing is seen when he says, "You puzzle me in the evening. I invited you to you down here." And he also says, if it would please me now to draw you out to learn more of you, therefore speak." He has this interest. He has his interest to get to know more about her. He's saying it clearly in the text, and usually in that era, a man of his grandeur would not really care to know the staff. They know them when they interview them, they have their little exchanges, but the way that he is so interested in her it seems a little odd, and I take that as foreshadowing into maybe there's an interest that he has for her. The sentence for symbolism is, I smiled, but not in a very complacent or submissive way. This is Jane's silent defiance. He's asking her to do something. She's not being rude, but at the same time, she's not complying either. It shows the strength and fire that she has within her. It shows a little bit of her personality to him. Normally in that era, someone, when they're being addressed by their boss, would be more than willing to give in to what they want, and she's not doing it. Another thing I wanted to point out for the literary device is the mood. Accordingly, I sat and said nothing. If he expects me to talk for the mere sake of talking and showing off, he will find he has addressed himself to the wrong person, I thought. That's Jane's reaction to him egging her on to talk to him. She's being patient with him, but at the same time, she's still holding her ground. Another aspect is the imagery. He bent his head a little towards me with a single haste. Glanced, seemed to dive into my eyes. He still has that yearning to know her, even though he kind of has to force his way in. He gives off a pretense that he doesn't care, but he still cares. He insults her, but he's still trying to get to know her. And finally, the last thing I wanted to bring up was a metaphoric verb. He seemed to dive into my eyes. This was also an early indication of Jane picking up on him liking her, maybe a little bit of her liking him, because she kind of recognizes the need that he has to know her. She sees it. She's not denying it, but she is being defiant by the way he's kind of trying to bully her. So all of these lines, along with this part, give the early indication of there's something going on between them, and that's why I picked this passage. When you first read it, you would never think to be able to read into it in between the lines. I know that when I initially read the book, I thought he was being rude, and I thought that Jane was scared. But then as I read more into it, I realized it's kind of like a little bit of foreplay, where he's trying to push himself on her, and she's not getting scared, but she's not rejecting him, but she's not playing his game either. And that to me was an early indication of the kind of chemistry that they have together, the interest that they might have together, and a little bit of the foreshadowing of what might come into the relationship. The dynamic between them tends to play off very well, where he's kind of fiery to her and she's calm, but yet on the inside she feels fiery towards him, and he seems like to be calmed or relaxed near her. And the indication of that is when he said that he wanted to talk to her and that it would please him if she would want to talk to him, as we read in the earlier text. These two characters seem to be very reserved in their own little personalities, yet when they come around each other, they seem to catch each other's attention very quickly and very strongly, but yet they're both very subtle in revealing their intention. You have to pick it up, in the words and in the language and the way that they go back and forth, and then also compare that to their personality, because Jane is not afraid to speak. There have been many points in the book where she willingly speaks out, and yet she's very patient with him. So I found those parts interesting. I want to thank you for listening. This is the end ticket. And so my call to action for the listener, I hope you enjoyed it, but can you spot another line that foreshadows Jane and Mr. Rochester's future relationship? And can you please write that in a sentence? Because this aspect that I brought up is just one of many. Chapter 14 is a very long chapter, but it is rich in conversation, because there were indications before this passage and there are still some after. So once again, thank you